Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Everybody has come with their thinking caps on today for an active discussion.
Okay, people are starting to stream in now. And just a reminder, we are recording this meeting, and we are also streaming live to Facebook, to the Switch Facebook page.
So David,
Yes.
I did bring just a few slides about that resilient building process that's been initiated by Canadian Academy of Engineering. So I can show those if conversation languishes.
Well, or even if it doesn't, we can fit it in. I'm hoping. Yeah. I have one slide on my heat pump with backups if need be, but and I believe Paul was going to have something to present.
I got a couple of EV related slides. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
And
Anyway,
Steve Isco
yeah,
has a couple slides.
Awesome.
So are you happy with your heat pump, David? That's the big question.
Well, it's different. You know, I still have to have a furnace because I didn't go to the extreme of a cold climate one. You know, the price is exponentially higher as you go to more efficiency. So
Yeah.
Anyway, I can get into that if and when there's
Perfect.
we get to that stuff. Yeah, it's one of those you could talk for an hour on it, or you could spend 2 minutes and just give some high level stuff.
Yeah, and I have to contact Rosie too, because you've had one for decades, right?
Well, yeah, and now we just got a heat pump hot water heater as of 3 days ago, and that's really nice to have hot water again.
Oh, brutal.
David,
David,
you said
I've had
they
a
were
heat pump
supplying.
here I've had a heat pump here for 30 years and have never looked back. It's a great investment.
Perfect.
And
good to hear. Good.
lived in a place for about 10 years now with horizontal ground loop heat pump. And that's all we have for heating. And a wood
Wow.
stove for, cozy nights.
Yes,
Perfect.
but
Well-
ground loop is a step up, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
from air source.
Yeah. It was done during when there was all those the huge retrofit programs for back in, what is it, 2008?
Okay.
When they were
Yeah.
giving those huge home retrofit bonuses.
Yeah. Anyway, fairly small crowd so far. Should we leave it a minute or two more, and then we can jump in? Yeah, I hope everybody's getting their snow tires on, because it's that time of the year on that as well, isn't it? Yeah, we got the new furnace about 2 days before the cold hit, so the timing was good on that front.
David, you said earlier there were supply chain issues for some controller or something. That was resolved?
Yeah, I'm expecting. So I ordered this in September, and I'm expecting my final thermostat in January. So
I was talking to Peter Walker, who's been in the window business for a long, long time, and he says there are tremendous issues with getting windows in it's delays of months. So.
Yeah. There's been articles in CBC and stuff about that too. Anyway,
Just as an example to that, Ted, we've just supplied some minerals to a customer of mine as a favor, actually, or just trying to jump in. They were receiving calcium aluminate from China, and the cost of the shipping in 5 months went from $4,000 per container to over $16,000 per container.
Yeah.
I've heard for other
Yeah,
goods, it's
I've
almost up
heard
to
that.
20 now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, we should jump in. We're getting to the meat of things anyway, but we should just jump in and go through the formal stuff at the beginning, and then get on to the various sector news topics. And as I said, it's a small-ish crowd, so we can make sure that everybody has their say. So anyway, we're trying something new today. We wanted to let the members chime in with things of interest. The board has by and large prepared a little bit of something that we thought would be of interest. So anyway, we're just gonna see how this rolls out. There's always lots of discussion in the sector news section, and we thought, well, maybe it's time to just devote a whole session to that. So we'll start with going around the table as we always do, because a lot of what we do is try and do the networking thing, so that we can share information during or after the session, and make sure that the community knows what's going on. So I'll start just to make it go. David Hindman, I'm the current president and board chair. My day job is the chief science officer with a startup in Napanee that makes a sustainable fire suppression gel for the wildfire and municipal fire department sectors. So I walk the sustainability talk in my job as well. And I drive an EV and just installed an air source heat pump. So that's what I was going to talk about if and when there's time. Ted, do you want to? Well, I'll go.
Yeah, it's only one page. Why don't you do it? And because you can see everybody.
Oh, okay, Steve Isco, you're up.
Thank you. Retired academic. My wife and I have an EV, but it's been at the dealer since August 23rd, and we're waiting. By the time, maybe by the end of the month, we will get a replacement battery. I can tell you, though, the interesting aspect is that I calculate that right now it's costing me 4 and more like 5 times as much to drive a gas-powered vehicle than an electric vehicle. And
yeah,
while the company is paying for the rental, they're not paying for the gas. And that really frosts me. And it doesn't have snow tires yet, if at all.
Yeah, okay.
And yes, we have an air source heat pump at our house. We installed it as soon as we bought this place in 2012. And it's wonderful, but I can't break down the cost because we have a gas furnace backup. Over to you.
Which is the combo I did, yeah. All right, John Baird.
Good morning, all. Representing senior housing development in Belleville. Lately become very interested in EVs. Had the chance actually to drive one. I felt like George Jetson for the first 10 minutes. My particular interest though right now is the bidirectional energy source that's available now through a couple of manufacturers, so that in the event of a power outage, then your vehicle will power your house. I'm very interested in finding out more about that. That sounds very interesting.
Maybe someone today will have leads on that anyway. Rosie.
I'm Rosie Hyde. I'm the manager for research and innovation services at a large consulting firm. I have a number of renewable energy devices on my home. We have 2 electric cars. One of them is from 2019. It has a 62.5 kilowatt hour battery. In the summer, we could go all the way to Ottawa to visit my daughters and back on the same charge. Not anymore. So as it gets colder, every outing is kind of interesting, and we're finding more places to charge. Thanks, David.
All righty, just a sec here. I've lost my Zoom screen. Harriet.
Just so you know, Rosie, at the bowling alley in Kempville, there's a free level 2 charger. We went to Ottawa last weekend, and one of our hosts said, "Did it cost you $4 to drive here?" And I said, "No, I think it might be as high as $6. So I really hear you, Steve. It must be very frustrating. Harriet Waterman, retired NRCI rep, retired from the switchboard. And we have an EV and we have solar panels and solar thermal and looking seriously at a heat pump of one kind or another.
All righty, over to Lucas.
Hey everyone, Lucas Duchesne, energy manager at CFB Kingston and instructor at St. Lawrence College. I also have an EV, don't want to break up the chain, I guess. But working on all sorts of really exciting energy efficiency options over at the base.
And next we've got Ian Kilborn. Morning, Ian.
Yeah, good morning. Ian Kilborn. Yes, I'm part of the EV club, had one for a couple of years almost now. I'm doing energy auditing and building energy modeling. And I'm almost certified now to, or recertified to do residential homes under the new Greener Homes program. What a journey that is, but almost at the finish line there. So look forward to doing some houses, and I do commercial energy audits already, and a big background in solar, so I'm always interested in that.
All righty, Darko.
Darko Matovic, on the board, vice chair, and well, I don't have an EV, but I'm sure that my next car is going to be. However, I'm hanging on to my old Ford Focus until I see some viable station wagon types of EV, because having a single car in a house with lots of nature around, you need something to put your brushes and so on. Other than that, you know, involved with renewable energy in general.
Darko downplays himself. I see him in the middle of a blizzard in the middle of February riding his bike. So he takes it a step further than a lot of us. All right, back on to Abdul.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Well, thank you, Darko. I was worried I'll break the chain, but I'm glad you did just before me. I drove a hybrid once, but definitely that's the way to go forward. So I'm the investment manager for sustainable manufacturing at Kingston Economic Development Corporation. Part of our mandate, we really focused on developing and being part of the ecosystem forming in Canada. We've been aggressively targeting expanding companies in the EV space, whether it's the chemistry of the batteries, manufacturers, or even the charging stations. So we're working on some projects. Hopefully we're going to get more charging stations for everyone, and glad to be here with you all.
Thank you very much for joining us. Over to Paul.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Paul Mcclatchy here. I'm a switchboard member with, I'm actually from the city of Kingston though. And I have a portfolio of work that includes things like EV strategy, EV charger installations, brownfield redevelopment, that sort of thing. Getting a lot more back into working with the climate change portfolio with Julie Salter-Keene, so that's good. I don't have an EV. I hope to one day, but I'm notoriously cheap with cars because I don't think I've ever spent more than $5,000 on a car. As soon as those numbers come down for EVs, I'm right in there though.
Good.
Next.
All righty, Helen. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm a retired home builder, and I guess I'd say that my major thought or issue to try to contribute to Switch has been for many years the same. I'm reticent to complain when I don't have a suggestion or an improvement or a proposal, but the issue that's always on my mind is the building sector. I built a single family custom passive house. And this is, I think we all know, is a technology that has taken off great tons in certain parts of the world, in Europe and elsewhere, and has made very slow inroads in North America, largely because the cost of energy here is still too high. And I could go on about that.
Too low.
No,
Too low.
it's just an introduction. Aren't we going to do all the introductions and then people can talk about what they want to talk about? Or anyway,
No,
I
but
don't.
I thought, isn't the problem with energy is that it's too low still?
Did I say it wrong? Yes, I must have
You
said it.
said
It's
high.
too cheap. I
Okay,
beg your
all
pardon.
right.
Thank you. Thank you. It's too cheap still. And
Too early in the morning, yeah.
that too. I understand that problem, but what gets me is that we've never been able, I don't know who we is, been able to attract to this group, to Switch, to our little corner of the world trying to do what we do. We haven't been able to draw in more people from construction, development, home building. That's my topic, and my 15-year-old Volvo wagon, it has developed some problems that are not economic to fix, and we're still getting around quite well, but the writing's on the wall. And unfortunately, I was hoping that it would last a couple more years so that the EV market would be a little fuller and deeper with respect to choices. We'll see. That's where I'm going,
Okay.
but I don't see what I want yet.
All righty. Well, thank you, Helen. Next we have Carol on my screen anyway.
Carol Mckay. This one? Can you
Hello?
hear
Yep.
me? Ted?
Yes, yep, we're good, Carol.
Yep.
Anyway, I'm just an interest observer with a special interest in hydrogen. And I am a librarian by training, so I tend to look up a lot of articles about hydrogen. And that's about all I can say about myself.
Thank you very much. All right, let's things have moved around here. Spencer. Okay.
Sorry, the windows moved around.
Sorry, I'm having computer issues this morning.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Spencer Gardell, technician to Camera Kingston, electric car enthusiasts.
Drives a bunch of them, yes. So, all right, Devin, please.
Hi, I'm Devin Lake. I'm a mechanical engineer at a local consulting firm. I've always had interest in sustainable design, and I don't have an EV yet. I think it will replace my wife's car when it needs to go next. I don't have any renewable technologies in my house right now. I'm focusing on building envelope stuff and tightening that up and increasing R values. But at some point, maybe we'll get there. Looking on my professional side, I'm trying harder and harder to win projects that have a sustainable focus. They're still somewhat rare, but we're seeing more and more demand for air source heat pumps and geothermal, ground exchange heat pumps. So that's exciting. And on our last few projects, we're seeing a lot more requests for electric vehicle charging stations at multi-unit residentials and stuff. So we're definitely seeing inroads in that area for all of you that already have your EVs. So that's me. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Bob Vasily.
Hello, everybody. Bob Vasily. I own a mining operation, a willastonite mining operation at the north end of the city of Kingston. Very energy conscious. We're trying to build a mining operation which is green, which will include solar, and we're electrifying it as much as we can. The product we produce is largely willastonite, which is an interesting mineral for the environment. We're looking at dedicating, we have about 17 million tons of it here. We're looking at dedicating about 7 million to as a soil amendment for agriculture, horticulture. It has the potential, based on the research that we've been doing with University of Guelph, of sequestering about just under 3 million tons of CO2 when applied in agriculture, which is the equivalent of about almost 75 million trees. It does it in a permanent way, so it's actually better than planting trees, and I'm excited to be here with everybody.
Thank you, Bob. Andrew Backus.
Morning, everyone. Good to see you. Former board member with Switch, currently co-hosting the hydrogen working group with Harriet. And my day job is an advisor in the Economic Development Office with the City of Brampton.
Thank you, Andrew. And Vicky.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Vicky Schmolka. I think I'm a Switch cheerleader. Like I really support all of the people who are doing things in the sustainable world. I don't really like that word, but anyway, you're moving things forward, and that's great. My 12-year-old car died in the spring, and I have not replaced it, and I was hoping to buy an e-vehicle, and it is incredibly difficult in the market to do it. Any of you who have working e-vehicles that would like to auction them off, I'm sure you could do very well.
Lucas has a 2018 Leaf.
Well, gee, I gotta wait for the same problem. I gotta wait for another one to come into stock, so I can't be without a car.
It's actually really hard to buy a car right now anyway.
You see
Just looking on the
lots
lots,
are empty.
They are.
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? Yes, I'm really interested in geothermal and solar for my house. I live in a tiny house, and my only claim to fame in this roster of people who are doing great things is I haven't turned the furnace on yet.
That's good. I hope you're surviving with lots of sweaters.
Actually, it's a little townhouse, and it is really quite comfortable without. Although I was just off for 5 days, so I should ask the other people I live with how they were managing. Maybe they turned the furnace back off when I came home.
The good news, Vicky, is the next 14 days is above average temperatures.
There you go. And we haven't heard from Ted yet.
Ted Chu, former executive director of Switch years ago, and currently on the board. We haven't bought a car in 10 years, boy, but I have this Honda Fit 2008 little car still going. So I don't, if I sell it, somebody else is going to buy it and drive it. So I'm just going to keep driving that until it's uneconomical, and it seems to be going fine.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That was probably a good part of the introduction to the discussion today. So we've done the introductions. I am somewhat sorry to say that we have no new members in October. So if anybody here knows of people that should be members of Switch, please pass along that information. And but overall, our membership is staying stable. We've regained some corporate members that have come back into the fold, so that's been good for us. So anyway, enough of that. So now on to the main event. As I said at the beginning, we kind of thought maybe it was time to just go around the table and do the sector news, but let's flesh that out and let people dive in. If people have taken the time to have a slide or two, we can share screens and have a little bit more in-depth discussion about things within the sector news realm or outside of that, anything in the sustainability space that people have a passion about. We would ask that you keep your comments fairly short. I think the instructions went out with, prepare one slide, just to try and contain discussion so that we can get to as many different topics as possible between now and 9:30. So I've prepared a list of the sector news in what I kind of thought would be an order that people would be interested in, and we can churn through that and see where we stop. So the first one that I had put on the list was solar. And obviously it depended on what the what the audience was today on which things we're going to be interested. Oh, and we had Bill Pollock disappeared and has come back, we hope. Bill, are you there?
Bill says he's in a quiet house, so he's just listening. And Bill, if you'd like
Okay.
to introduce
right.
yourself in the chat, but if your house is no longer quiet, feel free to say hello.
Say hello, yes. All right, thanks, Ted, for running the chat. So anybody have something they'd like to discuss on the solar front? Ten years ago, we wouldn't have had a meeting that wasn't all about solar.
I would note that I just saw in the news that third-party ownership is now approved in Ontario for net metering. So this means that someone else can own the PV on your roof, and the energy can still go against your utility bill as if you owned it. So this opens up some possibilities for new business models, and for people that don't have the capital to invest in their own solar system. Someone else can pay for it and put it on their roof, and they can benefit from the feed-in tariff. There'll be a bunch of questions you might have that I probably don't know the answers to, but this is something that the IESO has finally approved, and people in the industry have been asking for it for a long time. Maybe others know more about it than I do.
So whatever the revenue stream from the feed-in tariff or however it's being structured, I guess the company would take a slice of that, and the slice would go to the owner of the rooftop.
Yes, that's right. Feed-in tariff is not really the right word to use. It's net metering.
No, it's not anymore. It's true.
It's net metering, so it's reducing your existing utility bill by whatever you generate. And I believe you end up buying your electricity from the company that owns the PV on the roof. So there's some details there that I'm not on top of, but it's a new business model.
Yeah, I'm interested, David, in what John is investigating with respect to powering the home, et cetera, because when our FIT contract expires in about 8 or 9 years, we still generate double as much as we use. So the question is, what can we power with that? And as John indicated, this is sort of an evolving technology, and I think an important one for us to keep our eyes on because it just isn't there yet.
Harriet, right now.
Sorry. Is this a free fall, or do I raise my hand to speak?
It's a free fall. Let's go. It's a small enough group.
Yeah. Quick question.
I'll try and keep an eye on that.
Very naive question. If I, for instance, we're talking about solar, if I, for instance, had a project in mind where I wanted to know if something was viable, a solar roof, say, is Switch still, this is the way I think it used to be, is it still the case that I could make an inquiry with Switch saying, who we got who does this anymore? You know, who are the solar installation providers, and Switch could give me a couple of names of whether they're members or just even from your knowledge of the community. Is it still appropriate for me to use Switch in that way? Can I call Switch and say, hey, who are the EV owners? Because I am thinking about it and I want to call them up. That kind of question. Is that something that Switch does?
I would say yes. We do get, I mean, some of the members, some of the corporate members will reach out. Some of the economic development organizations have reached out saying, can you provide, some information on people that are in this space? In a general sense, yes. It's always a case of there may be no one in the network at that time, but fundamentally, that's, I'd say, a large part of what we try to be here for, is to make those connections. Yeah. Anybody else on the board have something to say on that one?
Thank you.
All righty.
If I could
Darko,
follow
yes.
along just with Harriet's
Darko first.
point.
No, go ahead, because mine is not answered to Harriet. Mine is back to the third-party ownership. So let Vasily. Wow.
So part of my
Bob?
question, being in the same situation as Harriet, we were very early in the microfit program. We're also looking at putting in a larger scale solar farm to power our mining operation. And the net metering is actually very, very beneficial in terms of the business case for that. But for situations where you're producing more power than you're consuming, is it yet the state where you would be able to, under net metering, sell that power to third parties? Does anybody know?
Ian, do you have a thought on that one?
They probably don't know either, Bob.
No, you can't sell it to third parties. That's what net metering means. The word net means that you must not produce more than you are going to use, or you don't get paid for it.
And that's the way the IESO gets to have some control over the total grid amount, I'm assuming.
I think also, I'm not sure if it's the case right now, but with the net metering, you may be permitted to use the energy generated at one facility at another one of your owned facilities. I'm not sure if that's the case right now or if that's just coming.
Yeah, that's called virtual net metering.
Right.
And I'm not on top of how available that is right now, but that's what that's called.
As far, unless
what-
your facilities are under the same meter, like in a large campus type situation, then it's,
Okay.
yeah, not really, not in Ontario at least. There are like mechanisms available elsewhere in the world that allow for virtual net metering. It's not in Ontario yet, as far as I know.
What I'm hearing is that we should have a session on net metering and all the nuances.
I think it's topical. It's topical for business. It's topical for homeowners. And it's going to be very topical for all of these microfit installations as these contracts come due.
Yeah, definitely. All righty. Well, that's good, because we're always in the hunt. 10 months of the year, we're in the hunt for topics for sessions. So this is good. Anything else on that front?
Yeah.
Oh, Darko, yes.
I just wanted to comment. I wanted to comment about the third-party ownership. That's actually a wonderful opportunity for people who may want to benefit from solar, but who are not inclined technically to take care of the whole installation, because it's one thing to have, solar installation. It's another thing to need to take care of all technical issues. I remember helping a friend in her cottage to put out solar, and starting with a whole bunch of decisions to be made about converters and inverters and battery backups and everything, down to just simple installation issues. So by having a third party taking care of that, it's actually a wonderful opportunity to spread it much farther than us, let's say, committed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess the only thing you have to be careful of is in the States, they tend to get kind of greedy, and I'm sure if someone will figure that out in Canada, and there has to be some level of equity between the roof or the structure that's provided and the opportunity to share in the gains. I think that we'll have to see who's offering and how much they're offering.
Yeah, I guess that comes back to government policy at some level, as many things do. Yeah.
And
Darko again?
For Paul, maybe. Would there be some place for city to act as kind of matchmaker in that process? So similar like city is in the business of renting out hot water heaters. Maybe this would be another option where city could take a role.
It's certainly it's not without precedent. I mean, our utilities, Kingston did rent out thermal solar systems for a while. I don't think they're in that business anymore, but so I'm going to say, yeah, it's certainly within the realm of the possible. And I think with the home retrofit program that the city is going to be introducing shortly, that solar PV generation is going to be eligible for the various types of funding, including local improvement charge funding, that are available through that program.
Anything else on the solar front? One comment. I just saw a news article that Alberta is installing the largest PV array in Canada. 55 football fields worth, or no, something. It's way bigger than that even. I forget how much it was, but it's absolutely huge. So we really have this.
It's over 400 megawatts. It's about 450 megawatts. As compared to the ones that we have in the west end of Kingston that are pretty big at around 100 megawatts.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody know what anybody know what their generation cost is per kilowatt?
I didn't see anything that detailed. No.
I've seen stuff coming out of the States that's really low, and
they're in the sunniest part of Canada, so they have an enormous solar resource in southern Alberta.
Yeah.
One quick thought, since we're talking about utilities, is, everybody knows that Jim Keach is retiring in January, and I'm not on the board anymore, but I know that Jim has been an unbelievable supporter of Switch throughout its 20-year history. And I just was going to throw it to the board to say, is there something perhaps on behalf of Switch that should be done when he retires?
Well,
just a thought. Yeah.
No, we can take that to our next board meeting. Harriet, if you no, I won't say that. You could join again on the board meeting if you want and bring up the topic. But anyway, that's a very good idea.
Well, I'd be happy to coordinate, subject to what the board decides you want to do or not do, or letter or whatever. Okay. I can certainly be the liaison for that.
Sounds like an Energy Innovator Award or something.
Yes. Thank you very much for bringing that up. That'd be awesome. Alrighty. I saw something from a chat topic from Lucas about the Greener Homes Grant. I can talk a little bit about that if I get a chance to talk about my heat pump. So maybe we'll park that one for the moment. Why don't we move on to talk about wind? Does anybody have anything about wind power, onshore, offshore, anything in that space? Again, 10 years ago, it would have been a full session probably, as everything was going up on Wolf. How long has it been that stuff's been on Wolf Island? It's a long time now, 10 years-ish, yeah. So yeah, how times have changed now. It's just background. All right, maybe I guess there's nothing on wind.
Speaking of Wolf Island, I should check out my photos. I have a photo when our group from Queens was standing in front of one blade on the ground.
And you were all dwarfed, yes.
Yes.
I can add something about wind, and that is the deaths of birds, especially if the turbines are placed in migration zones, is always a concern. But there are two peer-reviewed papers that I've seen which indicate that if you paint one of the blades black, the number of birds that die goes way down.
Yeah, and it's also a genetic learning. I mean, the smart ones figure it out, Steve. And the Nature Conservancy was all up in arms about, I don't know, Amherst or whatever. So I suggested they move the tall buildings in downtown Toronto to some other location, as that's a migration route as well. I mean, it's all bullshit and convenience based on money. Sorry.
I have a quick question, actually, probably for Ian. I'm just curious about the status of those, those horizontal access turbines that got put on they get put right on the roof line, the peak of the roof. I think you have some on your energy house there.
Ridge blade.
Ridge blade. Yeah. I was just wondering how those are working out, if they're still running successfully or not.
Last I heard, Ridge blade is no more.
Yes, unfortunately, Krista got ill and she, I guess they just didn't make it, Paul. That's what I heard as well from Sophie.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
They were doing a demonstration on the CFB Trenton site, and it was way more than I think anybody thought it was going to involve, as far as structures on the, structural on the roof, the permitting, all the learning curves that any startup goes through. But yeah, obviously health issues go way above beyond that.
So that particular installation is not even being monitored anymore, unfortunately. The study fell by the wayside. I followed up with the energy manager there in CFP Kingston because I was interested as well. And nothing to report. They've pretty much been mothballed on the roof.
Okay.
I can add something on the advancements and the wind power. So we've been surprised as well. We did have a contact with a company that's building these huge vessels to store the energy produced by the offshore wind farms rather than running subsea cables to the land, similar to the LNG. So these vessels would go capture the energy and then deliver it to the land. It's still a startup. It's in Japan, basically, because it's the seas there are wild, but it's something that's happening, and we're keeping an eye on it. So just to add that there.
So would these be large battery vessels to do the storage, or something else?
Yeah. So vessels, like imagine like huge batteries sailing through the sea, getting the energy generated, and then back to land to deliver them, just like oil.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Ted.
I have something that's not technical, but people might remember Ian Baines, who was trying to do this offshore wind earlier, and he's actually, I just accidentally bumped into them, and they've moved to Kingston from Burlington, so they live in Kingston now. Ian and Nancy Baines, just as trivia.
Not familiar with them, but anyway. Anything else on wind?
A question for the projects that you're describing, like this ridge vein project where it's abandoned. Who's responsible for taking that down? Does anybody know what the remediation is, or if there's if companies have to put funds up for this in advance?
That's a good one. I don't know. There might be
this particular
case, contracts.
Yeah, in this particular case, they're going to stay up there until the roof falls down.
So I ask it, partly because, and speaking of Ian, Ted, I watched the deconstruction of a monitoring tower on Main Duck Island that had been up, and we were concerned about it because it's been up for a good number of years, not maintained. So they did bring it down, but I understood that the taxpayers paid for that.
Yeah, that's the problem with this and brownfield sites and a lot of leftovers of the industrial complex. Taxpayers end up with the burden, don't they? Anyway, how about we move on? Next one I had on my list was policy. And in particular, I was wondering if people had some thoughts about what's going on at COP26. Thought that might spur some discussion. Harriet.
I think
Okay.
I think it can be summarized by blah, blah, blah. I think that's what Greta Thunberg said, build back better, blah, blah, blah. And she went through the policy of every country. And I think that's my take on it.
Okay. I mean, I saw the announcement about ending of deforestation by whenever, and I'm thinking, is Brazil on board with this? There's ways to do accounting sleight of hand to make it look good. Maybe I'm too cynical, but the big issue is we got to start doing and not talking. I think everybody around the table here is a doer. We get it, but how do we get the rest of society to be a doer as well? And I think a lot of that does come back to policy. Policies incentivize the enablement and the education and the deployment of sustainability. So, Darko, you got your hand up. I see Paul. Paul, you're unmuted yet. So why don't you go first?
Okay. I heard an interview with a fella. I wish I could remember his name, but he made a really good point that from a policy perspective, the economics seem to always win the day. These sorts of things. And he made the call for border control, border tariff control, so that when we trade with countries that do not have a price on carbon, there's an adjustment. And I thought that was really, really smart. Let's stop trying to convince other countries to do the right thing and just say, if you don't have a price on carbon, we're going to put one on if anything comes into our border from your country. I thought that was simple and elegant, and for that reason, it'll probably never happen.
Yeah, and that goes to the concept of exposed industries like cement and steel. I spent many years working with Lafarge, and their drive to lower carbon was because they're exposed and they want to get out in front of it for the producers that don't have to worry about it. So and it's also a global industry, so they need it everywhere. So but yeah, it's that larger picture of the international playing field, and we all don't want to be playing with the lowest common denominator. We need to raise our game. Anything else on policy? I thought, Steve? And Darko, yes.
Just a question about policy. Somebody wrote on the chat that can be imposed unilaterally by a country, but I'm not sure that Canada would be constrained by the agreement between us, the US, and Mexico. I have no idea.
So the answer to that, Steve, is theoretically, according to the World Trade Rules, you can impose these taxes on things that pollute carbon as long as you have your own taxes on them. But it's theoretical, so it hasn't really been tested. And I think one of the first places, I think India's been opposing a possible European border tax adjustment. And that may be one of the first places where the WTO rules will be tested. But theoretically, it's supposed to be okay.
Nice. Darko, sorry, I missed you.
No problem. I would just put two bright spots on this process with COP and generally. One, in my opinion, is the renewed drive to use like soil carbonation generally in various ways, including reforestation, but also enriching soil with soil organic matter as a really efficient and significant carbon sink that could work globally. And I'm also glad that it's finally being recognized that natural gas is really no transition to anything, and that's being abandoned as a sort of fallback solution, we are not as bad as coal. It's actually as bad as coal, really. So drive to phase out natural gas use is great. Now we need to do something about fertilizers, nitrogen fertilizers in particular, that use half of natural gas in the world is used for nitrogen fertilizer, and half of human population on this planet lives off natural. We eat natural gas, really. Without that fertilizer, there would be, the food production would be less than half what it's now. So it's not going to be replaced.
The green revolution.
Yeah, that's just. So some things are moving ahead.
Mm-hmm. Anything else on policy?
I was just
all right, Paul. Vicky. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, please.
I was just going to say I'm not as depressed by the COP26 blah, blah, blah. I think it's remarkable. You think back 10 or 15 years and you wouldn't have Boris Johnson. I mean, he wasn't around then, but you wouldn't have had people like him trying to stake his flag in the ground saying, I'm in favor of this, or, even our own prime minister really trying to get ahead of it. And I think the best thing I heard in an interview, which really speaks to Switch, is we don't need more leadership. We need more followership. And I think that's what's driving the politicians, right? They realize people want to buy e-cars, people want charging stations everywhere. People would like to see government taking more responsibility and moving away from fossil fuels, not funding fossil fuels. So it's always hard to see that tipping point. But I do think COP26 is seeming like a big shift. Certainly the politicians are trying to own climate change in a way that they didn't a while ago, because the deniers were kind of their funders. Now they're not as afraid of the deniers because they're afraid of the general public not supporting them if they don't get moving. So I'm a little more optimistic.
Ted, you had your hand up too.
I was going to get a little bit off topic, but it's still in policy. There was a vote in Maine just last week about whether or not to allow this Hydro-Quebec line to go through to feed hydropower to England. And so it lost. And so it's looking bad for that. But my question is, I wonder if that means there's an opening for Ontario to purchase more power from Ontario, or maybe the two are not connected. But I know that there's different jurisdictions who might eventually want to compete for hydropower from Quebec. So I don't know what the main vote, certainly bad for greenhouse gas emissions in New England, but I wonder if there's an opportunity for Ontario, which is now facing the prospect of using those natural gas peaker plants for baseload electrical power, whether there's an opportunity there. I don't know. That's something I got to look into.
Yeah. Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just really quickly, the last time I heard anything about the Quebec connection was that there was a phase discrepancy between Quebec and Ontario that needs to be addressed, but I never heard whether that's a significant issue or not. But
well, you have to build these sort of very expensive connection points between the two grids. So which means that you have to like plan it out and know exactly what you're doing before you pay $1 billion to build these I forget what they're called, these connection points.
Right.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Darko.
No, I just wanted to clarify the phase issue should not be an issue, because these modern high voltage links are DC. They're not AC links. So you have, I don't know, billion volts, whatever, but they are, that's exactly that line that's not going to go through Maine. Could be, Ontario would need stronger link with Quebec just in terms of capacity. But that is, in my opinion, an opportunity now. And maybe we could have some kind of action to propose that to Ontario government, because it's with some other groups as well, and saying, please, take this opportunity and, we encourage you to come to terms with Quebec on that.
Yeah.
Um,
and another aspect back to the sort of energy issue is and who gets what when and where, and getting off of coal and whatever is, I'm seeing an awful lot of articles right now about the resurgence of coal, to feed China through the winter, to feed the renewed energy demand that manufacturing is under, to meet all of the supply chain issues for the developed nations. So have there's that disconnect between pushing green and getting off of what we already know works. And I think there's major policy things there as far as moderating that transition. I mean, I don't have answers. I mean, that's I think beyond all of our pay grade, but that's certainly something that's come out of the woodwork recently is the push to start using coal again, and we're going, oh my goodness, Anyway, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Yeah,
cool. Paul, you were putting your hand up.
Yeah, I don't want to close down the discussion on policy, but I thought as a last note, if anybody's interested in working on energy and climate policy at the local level, City of Kingston has a project manager climate leadership position that is currently open. We're hiring for that. That was Dave Rowade's old position. The position I can see on the website is open until November 7th. So not much time if you want to get your name in the hat or put your name in the hat, or if you know anybody that might be a good candidate for that.
Cool. Alrighty. We're chipping away at this slowly. Why don't we go on to EVs? There was certainly lots of discussion comparing how many cars people have. And I know Paul has a slide or two on what the city's up to. Why don't we start there just to
if you don't mind, I'll quickly share my screen, and I just going to do a lightning run through of what the status of the city's electric vehicle strategy is right now. So I am going to try and do that. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Perfect. So in 2018, the City of Kingston approved an electric vehicle strategy with about an $800,000 budget. And it involved mostly from the municipal operations side, electrifying our fleet, including transit. And on the community side, the big push was mostly on providing a public electric vehicle charging network. This is kind of old news, but for about a year and a half to 2 years now, we've been operating 46 level 2 charging stations at 21 locations, and 2 of the level 3 fast chargers at 1 location in the downtown at the Frontenac parking lot. And that's a picture of the downtown level 3 chargers right there. This might be a little hard to see, but the important line here is the red line. That shows the total amount of kilowatt hours being dispensed by our public EV charging network. The green line shows when the level 3 chargers were installed. And we were getting pretty good usage of this until COVID showed up around here. And that really dropped off. I think there was a lot of EVs out there, but they were being kept in the garage for the most part. And certainly no travel, tourism, or anything like that. But this year, this summer, we saw a really remarkable jump. I think that was all the pent up demand of people buying EVs. I don't have the latest EV numbers for this area in terms of registrations, but I would venture to say it's probably almost doubled. And I think we were seeing that in July and August. Plus, we also know that a lot of this peak is due to travel from other parts of Ontario and Quebec coming through Kingston. And I'm going to say about 60 to 65% of our energy dispensed in our public EV network is from those 2 level 3 fast chargers. That's what people really, really want. And then finally, from our electrifying our municipal fleet, currently have 22 light duty vehicles. So these are the cars and small SUVs and whatnot that are operating in the city. We have the 2 new electric transit buses, and those are working out really well. People love them. No heavy duty vehicles other than the transit buses in the fleet yet. We have 2 ice resurfacers, Zambonis, electric ice resurfacers that are operating out at the Vista Center. Those are working really well. Just over the next 24 months, we have orders in for 16 additional light duty electric vehicles, another 5 electric transit buses. We're really trying hard to find 4 electric garbage trucks that we can run, and another 4 ice resurfacers. So that's where we're at with our EV strategy. I'm going to stop sharing here.
All right, Paul, I'm going to have a question about the electric buses. When I was working with Kutrick, the urban transit group, there was a lot of discussion about, charging on the road versus only charging back in the warehouse, for lack of a better word. How is Kingston approaching that at the moment? And are there plans to change it if?
Right, there's no plans to do en route charging. Those en route chargers are particularly expensive. And once you commit yourself to an en route charger, then you're committed to running your EV bus on that route, of course.
True.
I think as the electrification of the transit system matures, we might see that happening. But right now we're only running 2 buses. There's not a lot of comfort yet in terms of which routes they're going to run best on, given their range and so forth. So the management at Kingston Transit is hedging their bets, and they're going with the cheaper charging option, which is it's 150, I think it is 150 kilowatt charger that sits at the transit garage. So when those buses roll in at the end of the routes, they get charged there. So it gives them more flexibility and it's less expensive.
And end of the route at the end of the day, or just every time they've done the cycle, the circle?
I don't know the answer to that. I think they can do multiple cycles and they'll run for however many hours of the day they can run for. Certainly they can do more than one cycle.
Yeah, it's that duty cycle of being out on the road, being active and getting fares and everything was a major discussion point through anything I'd ever seen. Thank you. I'm just going to pull up the comment that Vicky Schmalkum made. What are the maintenance costs for EV vehicles versus gas powered? Are there significant savings to the city? And are they being used to finance more EV vehicles? So is the city recycling the cost savings into more of them?
That's a great question. It's a little early to have a fulsome accounting of that, especially with COVID. Everything's upside down. Nothing is as it should be. So certainly the last 18 months are not normal. But I have heard anecdotally from our fleet manager that the maintenance load and maintenance costs of the electric vehicles, and including the electric buses, is even lower than they thought they would be. They thought they would be around 25–30%. Other than a few little glitchy problems with duty batteries and whatnot, the 12-volt battery that sits in a Kia Soul, for instance. Maintenance has been a really nice surprise, very low.
Yeah. And I'm assuming everybody around the table that has EV home use size can echo that. I go back and forth to Napanee every day, and I know my gas or my energy consumption is about 1/3 the price of what if I was running a gas car. The only maintenance I've ever done is taking it in once a year to see if the battery is behaving well. And that really is more out of curiosity than out of need. So that's really the only maintenance other than getting the tires changed that I've had to do. So it's pretty good. Yeah, no oil changes, no gas fill-ups. Harriet.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know I brought this up at another meeting and I just forget the answer is to maybe Paul. I guess we have to go to the Limestone District School Board for the electric school buses, because then the children breathing all that diesel, it's really not good. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we tried to tackle the school boards a few years ago, and we're probably too early trying to do that. The market for electric school buses has matured significantly since then. But it's not just the one school board. You have to talk to all of them because they all use the tri-board services that run the contracts for all these private bus operators. And I would really, really like to see tri-board step up and say, we need some target percentage of our fleet to be fully electric. And, but they're going to need a place to charge them. So there's infrastructure capital costs there that need to be sorted out, and who's going to be the one that leads the way and looks for the grant money.
And the city would be happy to charge them for the charging, right, Paul?
For sure. We don't have any chargers that would be suitable for a school bus charging.
Okay.
But I see it. There's a question there from Bob as well about what's the source of the electricity for charging the buses, and it's grid supplied electricity, so it's whatever it is on the given day or time that you're charging. But as you know, mostly nuclear and hydro.
And for those, I'm assuming the rest of us, I charge from like 1 to 3 in the morning. You know, I'm helping to maintain that base load, and the price is certainly the cheapest, because that's when there's no peaker plant, no anything other than the nuclear base load.
Can I just chime in really quickly?
Abdul, you had something? Sure, Spencer. And I think Abdul, did you have something to?
Yeah, I'll go after Spencer for sure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
For everybody, quickly tying in solar and everything, we were talking with my friends in Ottawa about, if you have solar, do you charge your car with the solar? One of the things we sort of bantered about is it's neat to say I charge my car with solar, but it's better to supply green energy when you can to the grid, and then, as you said, take it off at night when it's cleanest to charge your car. So charging at night, even though you do have solar. I mean, I'm going to do it once or twice just to say I could do it. But and the other quick thing about this is that it's a good idea to, totally unrelated, sorry, but just before I go, if you have the ability to preheat your car, you should do it. You know, we don't always charge our car every day, and that will save your brakes. Talking about maintenance, because electric cars, when they're cold, they have a management system, and they don't allow as much regeneration when the car is cold. But if you preheat the car a little bit before you take off, or you charge a little bit before you take off on a cold morning, the battery will be sufficiently warmed up, and that'll save on your brakes. Because people thought, oh, I'm never going to replace my brakes, and then they drive a Southern California designed car in the Canadian winter, and the battery management system won't allow regenerative braking, and they all of a sudden say, oh, my car's running away, I have to apply the brakes and I have to run through brakes. So warming up your car a little bit, warming up the battery a little bit will save on maintenance and brakes.
Thank you. That's a great one to know. Because I do notice with my regenerative braking that sometimes it's more aggressive than others, and that may be the reason there. Abdul, you had something you wanted to add.
Just a quick question to Paul, because I'm interested in that. The electric ferries, Paul, is the city managing it or supporting their charging? No.
Only insofar as there's a grid connection that's required for the charger on the for the Wolf Island Ferry on the city side, and I'm presuming Utilities Kingston is involved with tying that into the local grid.
Okay.
That might be another really interesting talk at some point, getting the lowdown on how all that's rolling out. Anything else on EVs? We're picking away. I don't know whether we're going to get through the whole list, but anyway. Next I had on my list was geothermal heat pumps. So anybody want to start with geothermal, or I can throw up my one slide on my adventures in sourcing a heat pump.
Go for it, David.
All righty, let me see if I can what button do I push here? I can't find anything on.
It's the green share screen button at the bottom.
There it is. And gotta find the right. And I will put it in display mode. I've got a bunch of slides here, but don't worry. I think. Oh, so which screen are you seeing? You're seeing my notes as well?
Yeah, I guess so. We can see your notes.
Yeah. Anyway, all good. Because I honestly don't know how to switch it because I've got two screens running. Anyway, I wasn't sure who was at what level with the understanding of air source heat pumps. I came in really as a newbie. My gas furnace got ticketed in August when it was having its maintenance. And so I had to think about what I was going to do. And I thought, well, now is probably the time to do air source heat pump. To the question about the Greener Homes Initiative, I had arranged with Red Squirrel Conservation to do a home energy audit, which was the you needed to go through that process. During that discussion, there was talk that the heat exchanger in my current furnace was still under warranty. And I thought, well, why don't I go that route just to give me a little more time so that I really understand what I'm doing when I buy an air source heat pump. Turns out it wasn't under warranty, but by then I had canceled my Greener Homes audit through Red Squirrel. So I went ahead without the ability to tap into up to $5,000 in rebates. So that was bad decision making on my part. But along the way, the things that I learned about were these terms. The heating seasonal performance factor, so that's how well it heats summer and winter. And you can see over on the right, I've got definitions. My unit is at about 11 on the scale, the one I bought. The seasonal energy efficiency ratio, so you'll hear SEER and COP and these other terms. The SEER on my unit is 19, so it's approaching the upper end. My unit is not considered a cold climate air source heat pump. Those have SEER ratings down minus or down at the 20 or up at the 23.5 range, and some of them, again, there's that cost benefit issue. The more efficient they become, the more expensive they become, but some of them can get down to the minus 20s Celsius. Mine's good to -8 to -10 from the literature that I've read. So I did need to have some sort of a backup. So you can see I have put in an ultra high efficiency gas furnace, and there's a picture of the heat pump. It's off the ground, as I think all of them are, just because they do run when there's the potential of snow. And so you need to have as much of it exposed as possible. For those who aren't familiar with them, really they're a reversible air conditioner. In the summer they run just like your normal air conditioner. When it gets cold enough, they reverse and will pull heat out of the air and pump it into the house, which relates to the coefficient of performance. Heat pumps are much more efficient because they're using electricity to move heat around. They're not actually burning anything to make heat. So, you can't get a and correct me if I'm wrong here, anybody who has more technical expertise on this than I do. You can't get a gas furnace that's more efficient than one, but heat pumps you can get up, efficiencies of 3.5, because they're moving more energy around than it costs in the energy to drive the heat pump. So there's that. I did go to the Canada Greener Homes Grant. I have an Excel file of all of the approved appliances, and it's a file with about 20 columns in it and about, I don't know, 600 line items of all the nuances of the different heat pumps and furnaces and everything else. It is a rather daunting document. That said, when I was doing this, there wasn't a whole lot of availability of heat pumps. Again, it's that supply issue that everybody's been talking about. So I had a fairly limited range of what was going to be available in the time frame that I needed. So yes, you need, for most applications, you'll have a supplemental. A lot of people off the natural gas grid, may run a propane or wood in the heat winter as an offset. One thing that's very interesting, and my wife has noticed this and commented on it, heat pumps warm the air significantly less than a gas furnace. And you can feel that in the house. The air coming out of the registers just does not feel as warm. I find that the furnace or the fan runs longer. So you're getting a more consistent heat throughout the house because the air circulation is higher, but the air blast out of the vents is not as hot, which is something that we're just going to have to get used to. Anyway, I've taken up more than enough time on this. That's my take. I think it's a good investment. The heat pump was not that much more than a high-end air conditioner, so it made perfect sense to do it. And I will stop sharing right now. Any thoughts on that? Any other people's experiences with their heat pumps?
I'd just like to make a comment about the air supply temperature that you mentioned. So if somebody were to Google issues with air source heat pumps from 10, 15, 20 years ago, that would be a major complaint. They've made major improvements in that area where the air supply temperature is higher than it is now. So that's something for people to be aware of. If anybody's telling you don't get one of these, it's going to be cold, the air supply is going to be cold, and they're telling you because their source heat pump is from 20 years ago, then they're going to have a different experience than you're going to have today. So.
Okay, well that's good to know, and I doesn't bother me, but it has been noticed. Rosie, and then Ian.
Yeah, so we run our fan all the time because it's an old house and we want to keep the air moving. And that works well to even out things between when just our air source heat pump is running and when our furnace is actually running. But interesting things are that you can be comfortable with a much lower temperature in the room if you have a radiant heat source, which the furnace heated air almost becomes. You can go over to the register and stand there, right? So it's nice having a wood fire. That's a great adjunct to having a very stable temperature from the air source heat pump. The other thing that is good to know is your body believes it's as hot as your fingertips are. So having a cup of coffee really helps.
I remember seeing, oh, sorry, I jumped in.
Yeah,
Ian, and then Lucas.
I'd like to know if anybody has experience with good thermostats for air source heat pumps. And one of the reasons that people don't set them back is because at night is because when it comes out of setback, often the thermostat then calls for the auxiliary heat to come on, which is either expensive or undesirable. Everything in building science says we should set back, and we'll save lots by setting back overnight. I think the heat pump industry is kind of behind on this because we don't have the thermostats that will manage this properly. Really what we want to do is to be turning that heat pump on earlier so that you get the temperature you want in the morning allowing it to warm up slowly without having that backup heating come on. The only, I've done a lot of reading on this. It sounds like the Nest version generation 3 thermostat has some features in it that might help with this, but that's a $350 thermostat, and most people are probably going to have difficulty programming it to get that to work. So heat pump people, any ideas about thermostats?
Well, just to say, I'm on my second thermostat of hopefully 3. When the real one comes in sometime in January of next year, I'll report back then, because right now I'm using a semi-brain dead thermostat compared to what the heat pump and the furnace will allow. Lucas had his hand up, and then we can move on to Steve.
Yeah, it was just going to be a quick anecdote about how there was a company, a startup, that was doing wrist-mounted temperature devices that would add a little bit of heat or a little bit of cool to kind of fool your limbic system into thinking it was hotter or colder than it was. But then in response to Ian's, I think you're right. The only way that you could do that currently with like a heat pump is to have some sort of a thermostat that has really granular control about when you can have certain set points, right? And you can ramp it up, but then you're right, there's a lot of coding that, or at least just pre-programming in an app that needs to go on, and simple is best, and I don't think that's the proper one, but I think the Nest would do it. But all the points you raised completely still stand.
Steve.
We have a Carrier Infinity thermostat, and it allows you to determine the heat source. You can say a combination of the heat pump and your gas furnace backup, or as we have it right now, heat pump only.
Good. That may well be the version I'm getting eventually, when the chip shortage has dissipated. Bob, did you have something?
Yeah, I have a sophisticated thermostat, which is fairly expensive, and it can be programmed when to kick on the auxiliary heat. Before I had that, I have 2 electrical inputs into the furnace. One is for the heat pump, the other is for the electric elements. So the poor man's way to manage that in the shoulder seasons, when you're not really requiring the electrical, is just simply throw the breaker off for the electrical. And I've done that for 20 years before I got this expensive thermostat.
Cool.
Can you share, Bob, what is that thermostat that you have? Maybe in the chat, if you don't know right now.
I think it's that one.
Harriet, you had something?
Yeah, I was going to ask all of you that do have heat pumps. We're not really excited about having an internet-based thermostat where, subject to whatever. Are there any choices for these most efficient heat pumps that you've all been talking about that are just home-based and not necessarily internet connected? Okay, an Ecobee, but I think Ecobee, Bob, is also, or is there an option to de-network it?
I think during setup, you need to be connected.
I'll just answer the question, Harriet. You can de-network the Ecobee so that the whole world doesn't see it, but it also then eliminates some of your capabilities of managing it, while away.
Yes, yeah, but that's fine. I mean, we can take responsibility for that. Sure, thank you.
And just so everybody knows, Ecobee just got bought out by one of the bigger manufacturers. I forget which one. Don't know whether it was the Carrier or Lennox group. So I think they were having a hard time competing with the bigger players, I think. Anything else on heat pumps? We're not going to make it through the whole list. Rosie, yes.
So I just wanted to mention that we just got this hot water heater that has a heat pump action. So the heat pump scavenges heat from wherever the water heater is located. And for most of the your uses, you can use that heat, but there's also a kind of a resistance heat element you can use. It was hard to find the kind of hot water heater we wanted, but there's actually some really good videos on YouTube if you're looking for that kind of thing. The other thing is, since I mentioned this to a really nerdy techie friend of mine, he said, oh yeah, I got the same hot water heater and I put it in the room with all my servers for my computers. So it's using the waste heat from the computers.
There you go.
So if I can add just a comment to the heat pumps.
Sure, Bob.
Sorry. Okay, if I can add a comment. Ours is ground source. I installed a ground source heat pump on our home here that we built 30 years ago, and we fabricated it ourselves actually at the time. It's since been replaced by a water furnace. The heat source is a single well that we have. Now it's a fairly deep well that we installed, about 200 feet, and it recycles 95% of the water back into the same well. And we had to actually demonstrate, we had to get some special permissions to do this, but it's worked extremely well. In theory, that won't work because the geothermal energy is a certain radius. The total energy mass is a certain radius from the well that's calculated from normal ground calculations, insulation calculations and mass calculations. The reality is every time you flush your toilet or take a shower, you're drawing new water into the well, and it's being drawn from great distances away. And we've operated very, very successfully. We've never had, I've monitored the well temperatures. We've seen it go down to a certain point, about 36 degrees. And then it never seems to go below that. It seems to be an infinite sink of heat. The coefficient of performance, of course, for a ground source is far higher than an air source. It's just an interesting alternative. We do have a dry well for it. If we were in a situation where the well temperature was getting too cold, I could simply shunt more of the water to the dry well, allowing the well to recharge with all new water.
Cool. Well, you're a source on everything. I just want to jump in for a second. I see it's 9:26. We officially end at 9:30, and I actually have to run. I know Ted usually keeps things open for discussion until about 10. So depending on who wants to stick around, we can just keep going through the list until 10. Maybe have Ted take over on other topics that would be of interest to the users. If there's other people with presentations we haven't got to yet, I just wanted to sort of get a feel for do people want to keep going on this, because there's lots of interesting items being brought up. Those who want to keep going, how about raise a thumb?
David, it's Rosie. I do have to run at 9:30, but I could just show a couple of slides very briefly, if that works.
Okay, sure.
Great. I'm going to share my screen.
I said I need to run too.
Okay. Come on. Slideshow. Okay. I got a few slides here, but I'm just going to go to hit the high spots if my computer ever decides to share the slide. There we go. So I just wanted to let you know about a process that's ongoing that was motivated by the Canadian Academy for Engineering. And it's a roadmap process for resilient buildings. So I'll just take you to, hopefully you're seeing my screen here. I did a summary of what the Canadian Academy of Engineering is. So they got this program going, this project going, and you can see the link at the bottom of the slide there. The idea was to involve a group of people to develop a national roadmap toward resilient, ultra-low energy built environment with deep integration of renewables by 2050. And that was to have a 80% reduction in GHG emissions. Obviously, 2050 is almost a career away, but it's also only 30 years away, 29 years. So that was the goal. We've had several meetings. We met in March 2019 and started looking at what are the challenges. And you can see the groups involved there: the professional community, the construction industry, academia, and 3 levels of government. And then we met again, having identified some of the problems. We met again to look at some ways that we could address problems. And then in 2021, we met again, obviously the virtual meetings, especially to hear from colleagues in Europe who have already been able to do much lower energy buildings. And I just share with you kind of the summary from the 2021 meeting. And without even reading the slide, you can see that the overall picture is relatively complicated mixtures of technologies and ways of organizing them. It was pretty comprehensive look at what would you need to really have these dramatic energy and emissions reductions. And honestly, it's a long way, I think, from where we are now. A lot of the buildings that we're going to have in 2050 already exist. So there's a lot of existing building retrofits that would have to be done. Overall, there's lots to learn and act on about different code provisions for lower energy buildings. So that's a super brief summary. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah, it is 9:30. So those who do need to get on to other things, including myself, unfortunately, please sign off. The last bit of sort of housekeeping is that our next meeting is December 3rd. We're working very hard to get someone from the Green team at Royal Military College to present about some of the things that they're doing. Yeah, Lucas, you could probably do it, or should we leave it to
I'm not
Nicholas
directly,
or one of his colleagues?
Dr. Velopoulos was probably the best one to talk about that, since we
Yeah,
we don't
that's who we're
work
talking with
directly
there.
together all the time. In
That's
fact,
who
they
we're
actually,
talking with, or
he's a great guy.
good. Yeah. So that's where we're trying to go in December. And the other bit of housekeeping news is we're probably going to do our annual general meeting in March this year, just because we're switching up our year end, and that's going to fit better. So we will have presentations in January and February. Anyway, Ted, are you good to take over?
Yeah, I'm good, David. I'll take
things?
over. I don't know if anybody else has any prepared slides or wants to bring up a topic. I'll keep keep things going for a while. We can.
Ted,
I've learned so much this morning.
Ted, do you want me to? Yeah, Ted, do you want me to send you the sort of summary list that I was working from?
No. Why don't we just see if anybody has any topics to bring up? I'll just do it that way. Because we're down to
those
a small
that are
number,
left.
so.
Yeah. Alrighty. Anyway, thank you all. That was very interesting. Lots of neat stuff. And have a good weekend. And we will see most of you in a couple of weeks, or the board people in a couple of weeks, and the rest of you in a month. Bye for now.
Thanks, David.
You're very welcome. Bye for now.
Did anybody have any slides they wanted to show or topics they wanted to bring up, chat about?
I did one quick slide.
Vicky, yes, please.
If you'd like,
Please,
I'll see if I can share it. Well, just do this, I guess. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
Land Conservancy, we see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just thought I'd talk about the other side of sustainability for a second. So I'm the president of the Land Conservancy for Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington, and we actually set aside land for nature for all the benefits that nature provides. And I just wanted to offer that up into the mix of geothermal and everything else. There's other things to be done to have a healthy environment. So
that's great.
Yeah, in that regard, Vicky, I've never attended, but there's something called the Kingston Field Naturalist Club. Yes. And they're affiliated with Ontario Nature, which does an awful lot of really good things. And I was wondering, because that's the other side of a healthy municipality, if we should consider having someone from there speak to a switch meeting.
from Ontario Nature or
Either, or the
So-
Kingston field, because they're,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
go ahead.
The Kingston Field Naturalist has been around for about 50 years, and actually about almost 20 years ago, they decided they didn't want to own any more land. They own 2 nature properties, the Helen Quillam Nature Reserve near Frontenac Park, and also the property on Amherst Island in the Martin Edwards Reserve, and then they have Sylvester property next to it. And they actually, it was members of the Kingston Field Naturalists that reached out to me to help set up the Land Conservancy to be the local land trust. And so Ontario Nature is a provincial organization that grew out of all the field naturalist groups in the province and owns, I think, 26 properties, including some around Charleston Lake. And then the Nature Conservancy of Canada is, of course, the national priorities land trust. So I think the board needs to discuss what it is you're interested in.
Yeah, I mean, we could even have you speak. I mean, I don't want anything to do with the Canadian Nature Conservancy of Canada, because they're funded by oil companies. And if you look at their parent in the United States, I think they're based in Virginia, they don't even indicate who their supporters and contributors are. So I know some people at Ontario Nature that left the Conservancy, and that's just my opinion on what they're doing. And the local is always better.
Well, thank you for that information. I didn't know that about the Nature Conservancy of Canada, even though I work in the sector. So
Paul has hand up. Paul?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Vicky. I really love the idea of nature conservancies. But I'm wondering if these kinds of conservancies would be interested in obtaining land that is not high quality habitat, say not forested, for the purpose of developing new forest, so that we could, as you know, like the city's tree bylaw requires, like, I think it's 2-to-1 like financial compensation for trees cut down and so forth. So it would really be interesting to have a partnership where, you know, we could reforest areas and we had some certainty that they would remain so.
Absolutely. We've looked at carbon offsets, trying to offer carbon offsets to people. It's a complicated market, the carbon offset market. And what we were trying to look at is whether we could do it informally, like all of people with sentiments like switches would say, oh, you know, I had to drive a gas car for 4 months. I'm going to put $100 into land protection in this area or land conservation. Not trying to avoid your question, Paul, but a little anecdote. We were offered an opportunity to provide tree planting for bat habitat as an offset for a company. So it's just all through third parties, right? They reach out to you and say, do you have land that we could plant trees on for bat habitat? And we didn't have a property, but we suggested, Harriet, this is interesting, Kingston Field Naturalists might have a property, and they do have the property on Amherst Island, but the people looking for bat compensation habitat for tree planting said it was too close to the wind turbines, so it would not be okay. So anyway, it's just a little anecdote for you. But Paul, yeah, I think the problem is land near the city, within the city of Kingston boundaries, that even outside the urban growth boundary is very expensive. So it's finding the right property to be able to do that compensatory tree planting. And I could tell you another little story. Sorry, so we're a small group, but when the Unity Road solar panels went in, there was $160,000 of compensation paid, and it went to Kuchiching area, to Aurelia. So it didn't even stay local, which is really a problem in the carbon offset world, I think. I mean, better that there's compensation, but at the end of the day, it didn't help the place where the damage was done to the environment didn't get the benefit.
Well, I think Paul's raised an interesting point, and that's why I asked you about it, Vicky, that, you know, with the climate crisis ongoing, at some point, in my opinion, I think Switch should also look at the other side of the balance sheet. In other words, not only renewables, but as Paul says, you know, there's huge amounts of opportunity in reforestation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that gives us, that really is incremental to all the other things we're doing, so.
Yeah.
If I could
Great.
jump in on the subject of all of these things that you've been talking about. There's, Paul, you said that in the city, you have to plant 2 trees for every one that you cut down. So I've noticed that I was told about this farm on the west side of Collins Creek, where they've cut a whole bunch of trees right by the shore of Collins Creek. And it backs, the other side of the creek is
Mile
housed.
square, Paul.
And my question is, on farmland in the city of Kingston, are you also required to plant 2 trees for every one that you cut down? Like I could look across Collins Creek from the east and I can see all these stumps.
I don't know. It's all contained within the city's tree bylaw, and it's not a 2-to-1 replanting that's required. It's the financial model that if you cut down trees, then financially you're responsible for providing financial compensation at a rate of 2-to-1. But I don't know if it applies to agricultural lands or not.
I think that's the problem, as I've heard it, is that a farmer is allowed to cut trees for agricultural purposes. So what's happening in that area is the farmer is saying, I need this for agricultural purposes. And it is land outside the urban growth boundary as well on the west side of Collins Creek.
Yeah.
And it has it's significant woodland, but it's never, because no one's applied to develop it yet, none of those criteria have been applied to the property.
Okay, thanks.
I'll look
Any
into it.
other topics about at all?
So that's my idea, Ted and Paul, and let me see who else is on the board here. To consider something like this topic, including Vicki speaking, since she's so knowledgeable, at one of our switch meetings.
Thank you, Harriet.
I have a question for Paul. Toronto has that deep water cooling loop that that provides heat sink for many downtown buildings. Kingston's obviously located in a similar manner with lots of institutions right near the water. Has there been any talks about anything like that in Kingston?
Yeah, there has. I'm not an expert on it, but anecdotally, I understand that a deep water feasibility study was done for Kingston, and the water depths just aren't here, not the same way as they are in Toronto. And I think that study was done. Well, I don't know, it might have been 15 years ago or something. And I don't even know who did the study.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was just something curious about.
Anything else? Going once, going twice.
I'd say we're done here.
Carol, maybe. Carol, did I see your mouth move?
I was going to say this quite a bit earlier, and I'm sorry that Paul Mcclatchy left.
No, Paul's still here.
Is he still here? Oh, there you are. This is a very specific reference, Paul. The Netherlands have a hydrogen strategy. The square kilometer area of the Netherlands is 41.5 thousand kilometers, which is roughly, if you take Kingston as a hub, go up the lake and down the lake 100 kilometers and north to just past Ottawa or around Ottawa, that area. If you look at their hydrogen strategy, on page 3, there's a really detailed diagram. They're using wind turbines and solar to produce the hydrogen. They're using a couple of electrolyzers. And after that, there is an even more interesting diagram showing where they're going to put all the hydrogen. They have exact figures. Now, sure, these are projections and estimates, but the power being used to run the electrolyzers, the power that would be produced, the amount of hydrogen produced, the number of jobs that will be given, the economic implications, and a nice little flow chart showing where all this hydrogen is going to go, including heating buildings, heavy transport, you know, like those big excavators and stuff the city has. You probably know that Costco and Walmart use hydrogen to power all their forklifts in their warehouses and everything like this. I live right on Mowat. I live right at the end of Mowat. I've overlooked all that lovely work that you've done on the waterfront. But when I was reading this Netherlands report, the sun was streaming through my windows. I'm on the southeast corner. I'm looking across at gazillions of windmills on Wolf Island. I'm not from here. My knowledge of the area is a little bit shaky here. I'm overlooking Doornkamp's excavator on that coal dock. And I know Doornkamp's got a terminal that they've all fixed up in Picton. Plus, they've been involved in the installation of a whole bunch of windmills on another island up that area. And I'm going, click, click, click. Why don't we start thinking in terms of hydrogen hubs and use Kingston as a hub? And you could ship the hydrogen up and down the lake and up to the whole Ottawa area. Anyway, I strongly recommend that you take a look at this. It's so detailed, and the Netherlands are really involved in hydrogen, partly because, of course, they've got a big interest in the oil industry and they're looking for replacements. That's all I have to say. Just Google Netherlands hydrogen strategy and it's page 3, this diagram I'm talking about. I thought if I were in anybody's position where I needed specific data, there it seems to be. Okay, that's all.
Thanks.
If I could add to that.
Definitely check it out.
There was Andrew Backus ran when he was at KEGO, ran this sort of local energy economy conference or whatever, online conference. And he had David Lazell, who's in Calgary, but used to be at Queen's in energy policy. And one of his slides, and we have to go back and get it, was suggesting, giving reasons why Kingston could be a very interesting hydrogen hub because of its location.
I know, Ted, and just, you don't have to, we're still looking at it in Canada from a fossil fuel perspective. Just change that. If you make little hubs, you don't have to worry all that much about hydrogen transport, which seems to be a great big problem. You don't have to get into huge pipelines going everywhere. Anyway, thanks for giving me a little bit of backup there. I was, as I say, sitting on my balcony, looking across at the windmills, I'd use water as my thing that I wanted to electrolyze. There's the whole bloody lake. And then I looked up the area.
Electrolyzed Lake Ontario.
Right. Well, I looked up at the area of the Netherlands, and then I looked at the map of Ontario, and I thought, well, you could have a nice little hub, and there's all your data, Paul. Economic implications, employment, how much hydrogen's going to go to each little sector. Anyway, it's page 3, and if you can't find it, I made numerous photocopies. That's all I have to say.
Great. Okay, well, if there's no other comments, thank you very much for being here. That was a great session. It's just all sorts of really good bits of good information and the ability to ask questions to sort out things in my head. So thank you all for being here.
Okay, thank you.
We'll see you next month in December.
Yep. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Ted.